Welcome to Everyone Loves Guitar, where we get to sit down and talk with interesting professional guitar players and related music industry experts. If you love playing guitar, stick around. You're in the right place. Hey everybody, this is Craig Garber from Everyone Loves Guitar, and we're going to show some love to the rhythm section. I have one of literally the coolest guys and most awesome bass players around. We're with the one and only Dave Roe. He's a 5-time Grammy-winning bassist and Nashville First Call session player and touring bassist. Here's just like literally like the very, very, very tip of the iceberg of some of the people he's worked with and played with and toured with. Carrie Underwood, Chrissie Hynde, Dan Auerbach, Sturgill Simpson, which they won a Grammy together, Loretta Lynn, Johnny Cash, he was Johnny's last bassist from 92 to 2003, Jerry Reed, Dwight Yoakam, John Mellencamp, Chet Atkins, Vince Gill, Duane Eddy, Faith Hill, Rick Vito, who I interviewed here on this show in episode number 208, Ray Lamontagne, Gretchen Peters, and like literally hundreds of others this morning. He just got finished on a session with CeeLo Green. He's also currently in a band with brilliant guitarist Kenny Vaughn, who I also interviewed on this show, episode number 250. Man, I can't thank you enough for your time. I really appreciate it, Dave.
Thank you, bro.
You grew up in Hawaii.
I did. I grew up on the west side of Oahu, out near Makaha.
When did you move to the mainland, and like what was the prompted that?
I moved to the mainland in the end of 1980. I was 29. I kind of had topped out over there. I had the best gig in town. I was playing in a jazz trio with a chick singer, and I'd already started doing sessions. And I just knew at that point that if I was going to do something national, you know, you kind of got to leave home, you know. So I did. So I decided to come to Nashville because I had a little bit of my mom was a country music fan. I mean, although I'd been in the 70s mostly a funk player and rock and roll player, but I had enough of a love for country music. I just felt like I'd probably survive in Nashville easier instead of LA.
Very cool. So you've been there since, you said 1980?
Yes, December of 80. Yeah.
Wow. And when you first got to town, I know it was a very different Nashville back then. How'd you go about getting gigs? You're still the new kid in town.
Man, I'm the luckiest guy in the world. They say this is a 5-year town. I went to a jam session about 5 or 6 days in, and some of the top players in town were there. They invited me to sit in. And I'm not saying I was an innovator because I certainly wasn't, but I was one of the first bass players that moved to town that was doing, you know, electric slap bass and funk bass. And I took a little solo and just met some of the guys, and I went home. And the steel player was Paul Franklin. I don't know if you're familiar with Paul.
Oh, yeah.
He went and called Jerry Reed. Jerry Reed was putting together a band. The next morning, Jerry called me and offered me the gig. And it was one of those deals where I really didn't believe it was him. I mean, at the time, Jerry was still a major star and one of the, as you know, probably one of the founding fathers of modern country guitar, country music hall of fame, all that stuff. And man, I went down and there he was. And I got my first major gig, and it was a major, major gig at the time within a week. I'm just the luckiest guy in the world.
That's crazy. And so your first gig is with Jerry Reed?
That's right, yeah.
Did that spoil you forever?
It did a lot of things. It spoiled me, but it also got me into the upper echelon of great players. And, you know, I never really had to audition for anything again because of that. Because, I mean, you know, you play with Jerry Reed, everybody kind of gets the message that you can play, you know.
Yeah, but that being said, you must have had great chops to even be considered for that, let alone get in there, know, you know, I mean,
I was lucky because I had come out of a 3 or 4 year run at playing in really high-end funk and fusion bands. So, and that really was kind of a country fusion band. I mean, right now I'm really proud. If you want to see some of that on YouTube, there's a Austin City Limits that I did with him. I mean, the playing level in that band was stupid. It was just so good. Unbelievable.
Who else is in that band?
Kerry Marks on guitar, who's one of the guys on right now, and the Blackman brothers, who like these bluegrass hot shots, and just it was crazy, just unbelievable. The first song on that YouTube thing, you'll just go, holy shit, Jesus!
I just made a note. I am going to check that out. It's funny because I interviewed Kerry like 2 weeks ago, and he was like this. That was like his same thing happened to him. He came to Nashville.
It was his first gig. I was there first, and he showed up about 2 months later. Yeah.
And I think if I remember, he told a story something like he had no underwear or no clothing, and he just had a pair of underwear in his Strat case.
Yeah, the piano player knew him and flew him in. I mean, he walked in off the street, and I mean, for guitar players, I mean, the rhythm section stuff was ferocious, but I mean, Reed was an absolute relentless workaholic, and he worked his band really hard. If I was being a guitar player in that band, is because like, you'd walk on stage and there were 3 different versions of 3-part guitar harmonies, and he'd pick which one you were going to do that night. You had to remember all that shit. It was just frightening, just unbelievable.
I would imagine you had a pretty good work ethic yourself, but when you came on board with Jerry, did that give you some good habits to retain, or some good knowledge about how to approach the business or the job for moving forward?
Well, it was a mixed bag for me, because it got me into a really good, strong practice ethic, especially in relating to a band, because before that, I'd just been in bands, and you get together and rehearse. Well, it was my first gig where, hey, dude, you got a week to learn 40 songs, so that's what got me. And they were all hard. I mean, it was like unbelievable. But it was also a textbook, because, man, I mean, the personal side of that was really difficult for me, because him and his daughter and me fell in love, and I had to leave the band because of that. But Reed was cool about it. I left the band, and he got me the gig. My second gig, he got me with Chet Atkins. So
you poor guy.
But he just didn't want to have his daughter's boyfriend in the band. So that's because she was part of the show too, and it just presented some complications.
Yeah, I could see that.
But the first year and a half, I learned a whole lot of stuff that you don't have. And even though Honolulu's a big city, I mean, it's still got a small town mentality. So you got to learn all that stuff.
So then you went to Chet, and who was the guitar then? Was it Steve Warner, or is it?
No, I took Steve Warner's place, actually. He was playing bass with Chet at the time. It was Paul Yandel playing the second guitar.
Oh, right. Wow.
I wasn't for long. I couldn't stay there long because Chet didn't work very much, and it was all a day rate. So I wasn't making enough money with him, so I had to move on. So I went from there to Mel Tillis, which was one of the biggest acts in country music at the time. So.
Holy smokes, man. When you don't tour anymore, do you?
It depends. My career's sort of been perfectly divided in half. The first 10, 15 years I was here, I was predominantly a touring musician. And then as I got off the road and eased into sessions, I really kind of stopped touring until I got hooked up with Dan Auerbach, who, the guy from the Black Keys.
Yeah.
And he's become one of the top producers in town. Not only one of the top producers, but one of the top sort of alternative producers. He's producing stuff that most of the guys in here aren't capable of doing. I cannot underestimate how unbelievable that cat is. He is, you need to interview him, man. He is just, I mean, people, it's neither take it or leave it thing with Black Keys sometimes with people, but man, they are brilliant. I really learned how to appreciate them, especially their first record. I recommend that first record to anybody. They taught 2 or 3 generations about real blues, and no offense intended, but not Joe Bonamassa style blues, but real gut bucket garage blues. And I couldn't believe it when I went and saw them play. I mean, 17,000 people, and they had a man. It was unbelievable. And so being in his band, his recording band has been great, because I'm 66 and I'm the youngest guy in the band, and he just went after all the old school R&B session guys, and that's what we're doing, man. We're just playing like late 60s Memphis style funk R&B with these cats. That's why cats like CeeLo are coming. It's like
that's so cool.
Old school R&B, man. That's what it is.
So you're playing with Russ Paul's in that band now, right?
Russ Paul's in the band. The drummer is Gene Chrisman, and the piano player is Bobby Wood. They were in the American recording section from Memphis.
Wow.
They played on the Box Tops, all the Dusty Springfield stuff, all the Bobby Womack stuff. They are 2 of the funkiest fuckers that ever lived. And, man, it's going to school every day for me.
That's awesome, man. It's
but
really
I'm highly aware that the reason I'm there is because all the old school great Southern funk players, they've all passed on. So, and I've always been sort of a student of those guys. Tommy Cogbill, for instance, who was the bass player in that rhythm section, is my favorite. So
it's really nice to see your level of enthusiasm for that. I mean, it's not like you're brand new to the game and you're so pumped up about that. That's really cool.
About it. People are starting to come to him. Anyway, to finish that line of thought is, I went on tour. We went on tour this winter, February and March. It's the first time I'd been out since I was with Dwight Yoakam in 2005. So.
Did you consciously make the switch and say, hey, I want to just get off the road and get more into studio, or it just kind of evolved?
No, it sort of evolved, and you reach a point with sessions that if you start going out and doing long tours, you're going to lose your work. So you have to at some point, put the suitcase down and just ride it out.
So now when you go out, it's kind of just a refreshing welcome.
It's a welcome thing, and I actually take it back. I don't know if you know who Ian Hunter is.
Of course, Mott the Hoople. Yeah,
I did a big tour with him in 2013. And I'm in a small band that John Mellencamp maintains on the side from his normal band. So I guess the point being is, it's sporadic. It's once in a while. Yeah.
Did you ever play with a background singer, Christine Ullman?
No, I did not.
Okay, because I know she did some work with Ian Hunter. He's a great artist, man. I love his writing.
Songwriters. I've become really good friends with John Mellencamp's guitar player, Andy York, who's somebody you really ought to check out. I mean, he is one of the greatest underrated guitar players in this business, man. He's just, and it was just me and Ian and him. I played upright bass on that tour with no drums, and Ian's one of the most incredible songwriters ever. Just amazing.
It's funny. This lady, Christine Ullman, mentioned the same thing about Andy. She said he's such an amazing, underrated guitar player.
He is unbelievable. It's unbelievable how good that guy is. It's frightening. Yeah. And not frightening, not amazing in a super chops way, but just in a super everything way,
a soul way. Yeah, I'm not really into chops. Don't impress me. I want to feel. I'm 54. I want to feel something.
He's got it going on, man. It's amazing.
What were some of the cooler road gigs that you were on, and you have any interesting stories that you can share?
Well, I was not going to tell you this story because I've told it so many times, but you're going to be the last person I tell this story to. But I just did a succession of road gigs, and one thing leads to another kind of thing. Usually about a year and a half a piece. I went from Chet to Mel Tillis to Dottie West, and you have to keep in mind these people were the biggest stars in the business at the time. And then Vern Gosdin, who was probably one of the greatest living country singers ever. And that was a great gig for me because I learned how to do really well at country harmony. I'd always been a decent harmony singer, but I had to learn the real legit shit, and I learned it from the best from him. And then I got the gig with Cash, and this is the story. I got the gig with Cash because one of my best friends was his publicist, and Johnny had decided he was going to go back to his old school style with upright slap bass. And I never played upright bass in my life. And my friend Hugh told him that I was the best slap rockabilly upright bass player that ever. I didn't even know what fucking slap bass was. I knew what the Stray Cats were, and that was about it. But it was Johnny Cash, and I wasn't making a lot of money at the time, and so I said fuck it, and I borrowed an upright bass. And of course, Cash's music changes wise is pretty simple. I could get through the 1-5 bass lines, but I don't know if you know, but I'm sure you can imagine, but if you've never played upright bass and you pick one up and you just start fucking around it for an hour, your hands are going to start bleeding.
Oh.
And I knew how to get through those changes. Didn't know all the songs, but they were simple enough to follow. But the slap bass part of it was out of the question. I just showed up on a gig. There was no rehearsal, no sound check. And I made it through the show, and I almost had to be hospitalized because my hands were so fucked. And I got called backstage. Everybody in the band's looking at me because I know I sucked big time. And this just goes to show you the ending of this story is just phenomenal. He called me on it backstage. He said, "You don't really do this." And he said, "You don't really slap bass, do you?" And I said, "No." And he just said, "How come you took this gig then? This puts me in kind of a bad position." And I said, "Man, I just had to give it a shot. And I got to play with you one time at least." And so he said, "I'll talk to you." And I guess that impressed him. The next day at the airport, he said, "I'll give you 6 months."
Wow.
So, and he could have gotten anybody. And the band was livid because I was horrible. I wasn't giving them what they needed. I mean, I was making the changes, but I wasn't slapping or anything. So I just got after it, and it never came up again, and it changed my life. It was the watershed moment of my life. Now I'm known as a lot of people don't even know I play electric bass, So it's like the slap bass thing. I got after it. I studied with the best guys in the business, and there you go. That's that. I can assure you that if that hadn't happened, I probably wouldn't be in the business anymore.
Wow. So let me ask you this. You have a Cash tattoo on your arm.
I do. It's right. No, it's this one right there. Yeah.
So obviously he had a major influence in your life beyond, getting you to play slap bass. Where was the mentoring or the,
Well, he was just the cool. I tell people he was the finest human being I ever met. And one of the things that he really would not tolerate negative asshole behavior. And he not only would not, he never did it. He's the only artist I never heard him raise his voice once to anybody, ever. And he also would get pissed off if he saw somebody else doing it. He would call strangers down for abusing other people. Don't do that. You don't talk to that man like that,
Oh.
And then when Johnny Cash talks, people listen, buddy. I'm telling you. So I learned that you can make it through this business and operate at a high level, and you don't have to be a dick to do it. And in general, that's one thing I do love about Nashville. I mean, I'm sure you've experienced that on a small town level. It's very biting and very competitive. And one thing I do love about Nashville is people really treat each other well, and everybody understands that everybody else does something a little bit different, and you don't have to be an asshole. Assholes do not survive in Nashville. You will not survive in this town.
I got to tell you, Dave, it's been the best experience of my life dealing and making relationships with people in Nashville. Everybody is super kind, extremely supportive, and
well, the main thing I took away from it is how easy it is. It's a lot of work being a dick.
It is.
You got to keep that shit up, man.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't relax.
Were you always? Did you have like dick tendencies and that you learned not to, or were you mellow in general? Or
when I first got here, I had that stupid, the bad side of jazz fusion attitude where everything sucked, but what I was doing.
Yeah.
And then I got called on it a couple of times. Where I grew up, people weren't afraid to say, "I don't think he's very good. I'm better." That kind of shit.
Yeah.
And here, there's just no time for that.
Yeah.
I got called on it a couple of times. Why are you talking about him like that? What did he do to you? You don't need to do that. He's not threatening you. Are you threatened by that? Then you need to work on you.
That's great advice, man. That's really good advice.
So it's a pleasant thing, man. You get it, especially when you start saddling up doing big time sessions. You're just looking around the room and everybody's a badass, and there's no point in being a dick. There's just no point.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. What a great also lesson about sort of forgiveness that Cash said he's going to give you a shot like that.
It's unbelievable. Just unbelievable. And then that gig was on a Saturday night. We traveled Sunday, and I had that conversation with him. Monday passed. Tuesday morning, there was a House of Cash. His office was called the House of Cash. There was a letterhead in the mail, and I thought, okay, I'm done. Here's my severance check, whatever. And there was a check for $3,000 in there with two names. Kevin Smith, who's the bass player with Willie now, he's first call slap bass player in Austin, and a guy named Archie Phillips, who's passed away, who was with Bob Wills and the Playboys. He Texas Playboys. He lived in Branson. He said, "Here's a little money. Go study with these guys."
Oh my God!
Give me the chance. He financed it.
Man, I got goosebumps. People, that's like one in a. Nobody does that.
No, nobody. And even they were great. There was a guy here named Mark Winchester at the time, and Roy Husky Jr. There were cats who were master slap bass players who could have walked on that gig without a rehearsal and nailed it. And they were all looking at me like, "You dick. How'd you do that?"
Did you ever talk to him about that later? Like, hey, why did I really appreciate it. What made you give me that shot?
I asked him one time, and he just said, "Look around. Look at all the people in this band. They're all nuts." He goes, "You fit right in." He said, "I can't have a regular human being in this band." It just
what a backhanded compliment. That's really cool.
But it was true. It was totally the truth.
Man, that's one of the best stories I've ever heard.
Well, you're hearing it for the last time. I vowed to never tell that one again. So.
Well, thank you very much, man. Let me throw out a few artists. Talk about how you connected with them, and maybe if you got a cool story about the gig. Chrissie Hynde.
Well, she was one of the people that Auerbach produced 2 or 3 years ago. It started out to be a Chrissie Hynde record. It ended up being a Pretenders record. She's just one of the clients we did. It was awesome. Just amazing.
And you talked about Jerry and Chet. You tell me, man, pick a couple of good stories.
Another great one that I worked with was Dwight Yoakam. It was one of the best bands I've ever been in. It was a guitar player, producer, singer from here named Keith Gaddis. And we had big shoes to fill. We took the place of Dwight's classic lineup band, the Babylonian Cowboys, which Dwight was smart enough to not try to emulate that band. He cut down from 8 pieces to a 4-piece, basically quartet, including him playing rhythm, including him. And I showed up with an electric bass thinking it's Dwight Yoakam. He goes, "Oh no, this is an upright bass gig. I want you to slap bass on every fucking thing on this show." It turned out to be like one of the best, most solid, straight up country rockabilly bands ever. It's one of the greatest bands I've ever been in.
Who is the guitarist in there?
Keith Gaddis.
Keith Gaddis.
Yes, who went on to become top first call session guy and also a first call songwriter, actually.
Very cool. Got another one?
Let's see. The Mellencamp thing has been great. That's gone through a whole lot of permutations. I hooked up with them to do some Woody Guthrie when they had Woody Guthrie's 100th birthday. They opened up some Woody Guthrie centers around the country and they did some concerts. And he wanted to go down to a small band, more root sounding band. So Andy recommended me, and I did that. And that led to a really exciting experience for me, which was John wrote a Broadway musical with Stephen King.
Oh, wow.
And we did that, and I got to experience the whole Broadway thing, which was a whole new world for me. And we actually did a 6-week run in Atlanta with that. And I learned a lot about that part of the business, and also just being in that band. Those cats are monsters. Everybody in that band is amazing, just crazy good.
Man, you've played with so many top people. It's really forced you to keep your game on. You can't waver.
It's just a different thing. You just start operating at a certain level, and everybody around you ends up being on that level, I guess,
That's great. You can't ask for anything more as a musician.
No. But the Auerbach thing, this thing we're doing now with all these sessions is just unbelievable. That's where Ray Lamontagne came in, and we did Chrissie. We just finished CeeLo. We did John Anderson last week, the old country singer who was just amazing. And it's just been one thing after another with him. And plus his solo record, which went #1, is just killer, just amazing.
Funny enough, I interviewed the guy who did the mastering on pretty much a Black Keys record, Brian Lucey. Do you know him?
Oh yeah, he's great.
Yeah, he's wonderful. Real sharp guy. Very cool dude also.
Yeah.
Man, so what was growing up in Hawaii like for you? Like, what was your childhood like?
Well, it was pretty typical. A lot of surfing, a lot of stuff, playing in garage bands, and then I just started getting more serious about playing bass. I actually started out as a drummer, and I lived in a neighborhood where there were 900 drummers and no bass players. So I took an old Silvertone guitar and destroyed it by turning it into a bass. It lasted about 3 months, and then I just had to get after it, man. I got a Fender bass and went after it, and one of the things about growing up in Hawaii is great. It's the downside of growing up musically in Hawaii, and also the upside. You play for tourists, which is sort of a tragic thing in and of itself. But also because you play with tourists, you end up having to learn a lot of different styles. So it was really rewarding. I walked into town 18 years old and started playing. I got jazz standards thrown at me right away, and I was lucky to come to town after playing in Hawaii because they were doing the number system over there when I was a kid,
Oh,
and
wow.
That's one thing the Nashville guys are wrong about. They like to act like they invented that, but the jazz cats invented that. They've been talking that way to each other and I actually got into this a little bit. They've been talking that way to each other since the 30s. And you can look at old Bach organ transcriptions, and he wrote down the numbers underneath each section. So there's nothing new about the number system.
Yeah, everybody usually in Nashville said they invented it there.
Well, they invented that. They invented the system of using it to cut records. That they did do. So it's cool. So I walked into town, man. They handed me my first number chart. The guy goes, "Don't let this scare you." And I went, "I know exactly what this is. This is no problem for me." So I was lucky in that regard. One of my mentors was a blind jazz pianist in Hawaii named Rudy Ochoko, and I just learned so much from that guy, and he blew my ears open. He really trained my ears. I got to where I could follow just about anything because I played with him.
Was either your parents musical?
No, not at all. My mom was kind of a rock and roll. She was a rockabilly and a rock and roll lover. She loved the Beatles and stuff. So she didn't stop me. At least, she had an open mind about it. So,
Dad, was he into music?
No.
Gotcha. So, you've had some really good fortune here, but what obstacles have you had to deal with over time throughout this journey that you've had to overcome, either business, personal, music related?
I would say my biggest obstacle was myself. You know, I was the king of I'll show me, you know, especially early on, running my mouth. And, you know, man, I don't want to get on a soapbox here, but I will tell you this. I have I have two regrets. One regret, the first one is that I didn't move here sooner. I wish I had been here in the 70s when it was slamming, because now I'm a big believer that every style of music, funk, jazz, rock and roll, country, peaked in the 70s. And I think everything after that is sort of derivative. And I think most people do agree with me on that. I mean, the funk stuff peaked in the 70s with James Brown and Herbie Hancock and all that other stuff, you know. Country too, with Waylon and Johnny and all that. And I wish I'd moved here earlier. And the other thing is, dude, I wish I'd quit fucking with drugs and pot at a much earlier age. Pot in particular, because most people view it as the most benign, and it probably is. But it made me, the reason I quit smoking pot was I got really, it just made me insecure and too introspective. And I think that that affected my career. I really do.
It also, I think it's hard to stay motivated. It's like I don't know anybody who's super successful that smokes weed all the time.
Well, I would have to challenge that, because some of the, I'm not going to name names, but some of the producers I work with and stuff, it either it does or it doesn't. But if you're a producer, that's another thing. But if you're a musician and you're having to relate to all kinds of different people, it just made me too paranoid and too insecure. And I just would quit early. I think my career would have escalated faster if I'd gotten away from that. And I don't recommend anybody do drugs. And if you come to town and you're trying to get in this business, you need to keep that shit to yourself. That's for sure.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks, man. What about like tuition? Any mistakes that you might have made along the way, and like lessons that you learned from making those mistakes? And certainly one of them was, you know, you said you had a big ego in the beginning. Anything else along those lines?
Just the big ego thing when I first moved to town, and also just the trash talking and, you know, talking that way and talking down about people and to people. When I finally learned that lesson, everything got better, you know?
Well, man, you must have learned it because you're on every freaking record. That's not like it's like statistically impossible for that to just randomly happen, man, you know? So whatever you learned, you did it right, man.
It's all, you know, it ends up being pretty much just common sense if you let yourself think that way.
Yeah. You know? How about the other side? Are there things that you did that were out of your comfort zone, but hindsight 2020, they were really good moves?
Well, the Johnny Cash thing, that whole story
That's
about
amazing.
being out of your comfort zone. I mean, it just, there's some times when you get stuff that you're not good at, you just got to dive in, man, because it just, I went after every genre I could growing up because I wanted to learn about it. And it was kind of intuitive mostly. When reggae hit and I wanted to learn about that, I just got into it, and funk and bebop and country music. And the latest one, the one I haven't conquered because it's such a feel thing, is bluegrass. And I'm trying to get into that now because there's no drums and the upright, it all leans forward, as with funk, everything leans back. And in rock and roll. So I'm learning how to do that and play with those guys. And some of the top session guys in Nashville are bluegrass, because they're the only people keeping real country music alive, if you want to know the truth, to me. And it's like, especially the utility players, the guitar players and the fiddle players and everything. It's interesting to play with them, especially in this Auerbach rhythm section where everything is so back in the pocket. When a fiddle player walks in, you can feel that tension, that different kind of vibe, that different look at the note, the downbeat, you know. But I want to get to where I can play that stuff and turn it on and off if I can. And that's one of the biggest challenges I've ever had, you know. And
they're playing at such a fast pace that's not slow, you know, blues, you know.
Play slow stuff, it's on top, man. It's at the very beginning of the downbeat. It's and those cats, man, they grew up playing that stuff. That's a lifestyle. Bluegrass. Yeah. It's the only music really out there that, besides classical, to me, that's a real lifestyle. You know, every one of these people that you meet that are high end blue, when did you start playing it? Oh, and almost all of them have the same story. Oh, we had a family band.
Yeah, man.
Bluegrass festivals, and you know, that's the deal, you know.
And I've spoken to a number of those cats, and they're so nice, so open, so like just sweetest guys in the world, man.
Well, most of those cats came from real family oriented backgrounds, a lot of religion, there's a lot to be said for that kind of ethic.
Yeah, totally, man. I agree with you. Any advice you would have liked to give yourself outside of, get off the drugs earlier? Anything that like you think would have helped you if you would have been open to hearing it from yourself?
I think that would have been it. Keep your mouth shut sometimes. And of course I'm 66 now, and anybody, even in non-musicians, this awareness comes, you got to take care of yourself, man. You just can't. I'm starting to lose friends now at my age and stuff. And, one of the big ones, we were talking about this yesterday in the studio, the cats that we're losing around us now, we're all smokers. I'll just tell you, don't smoke. That's another thing in this town. If you smoke cigarettes, it's liable to cost you a gig because nobody smokes anymore. If you smoke cigarettes, it's going to be tough for you to get a job, especially if you're up on a bus or something, man.
Yeah. So have you started exercising or something?
Well, I always kind of was cool. I was always walking. When I was traveling a lot, I love to get out and walk around. So I've been a big, heavy walker. I live out in the country now, so I'm a pretty heavy walker. But I'm talking about more like bad food and all that crap.
Okay.
In the last year, I've lost 40 pounds just from not eating bread and sugar.
Holy crap.
Changed my life.
You must feel so much better.
I feel so much better. And, and when you feel better and you're losing weight, you have a better picture of yourself, and so do other people.
Absolutely, man. The confidence level is through the roof. I know exactly, man.
Kenny Vaughn, you know how skinny he is. I mean,
yeah.
We have a little record deal. We've been writing songs together and playing in a band together for 17 years now. And it's always been interrupted by our work schedules because he's a top session player. And I mean, he's in the best country band in the world right now with Mark Stewart and those guys. But I said, man, you think we can, I'll never forget this. I looked at him, I said, you think we can do anything with this fucking shit at our age? And he goes, you can be old, but you can't be fat. And he's right. He's right. Nobody wants to see a fat ass bitch on stage playing guitar. Nobody wants to see it. Yeah.
That's great. That's great, man. That's cool. Hey, anybody that influences your playing that people would be surprised to hear?
No, I'm sort of typical, I'd say, of a 60s, 70s guy. Jamerson's a big influence. John Paul Jones, obviously a big influence. Some of the great country bass players here, like Bob Moore, especially on upright. Slap bass, it would have been Joe Zinkins, who a lot of people don't know about, probably the best slap bass player that ever lived. And on top of it, the greatest slap bass player, Willie Dixon. So. Yeah. And as far as that's concerned, and Tommy Cogbill from the Memphis Rhythm Section, his bass playing is just ferocious. And I had to have Dan Auerbach, this guy who's really an encyclopedic in his knowledge of music. This 38-year-old kid who knows more about music than everybody in the room. He carries 2 iPods and a phone, and he pulls up shit that I just can't even believe exists, and he pulls it up, and it's all R&B based stuff. And I remember, man, Sturgill Simpson and him both, they were 2 different guys. This is going to be a little musical part of it, but Southern R&B, especially Nashville style, is based a lot around 1/5 bass. Doom, bat, doom, that kind of groove would be doom, pat, doom. Those guys like the Delbert McClinton style of R&B. Straight ahead 1/5 bass against a funk drum track. But real R&B, if you're talking about Motown and Memphis and Muscle Shoals, the bass players were the busiest cats on the tracks.
Yeah.
Everything was designed around the bass. And I had to get that back. I mean, Auerbach and Sturgill both got in my face at sessions and said, I didn't hire you to play that shit. Let's have it. Come on. I heard you had this kind of background. I'm not hearing this. Let's have it. And I had to work my way back to being afraid of playing too much. And now it's like, I went in yesterday and re-overdubbed on a CeeLo song that he didn't think was busy enough. And that's the only environment I ever hear that in this town. They want more bass. Bass. Let's hear the fucking bass, And the drum tracks are static. Whereas on a Nashville session, the drums and bass are static and not much going on.
Totally. Wow, that's great.
I'm getting asked to recall my youth, and it's really phenomenal.
That's wonderful, man.
Yeah.
So, it's interesting you mentioned John Paul Jones because I've always thought the world of him, but his name never really comes up, with rock. bass players, and I don't know why, because that guy was such a fucking master.
Oh, he was also, I mean, he was like a white James Jamerson about it. I mean, if you just look at Ramble On, that song, for instance, is up into Jesus Christ, man. I mean, I remember the first time I heard that, I went, what the fuck?
Yeah. Do. Yeah.
The drums were static and the bass was all over the place. You know, he's another one. You know, it's just crazy. So good. So good.
Desert Island Discs, Dave. If I asked you top 3 in no particular order, and just for today, man, you could have 3 other ones tomorrow. What's your knee-jerk reaction?
Well, I can tell you the 2 or 3 records I listen to all the time, and this is from an upright bass player standpoint. I listen to the Bill Evans Riverside stuff. You know, him and Scott LaFaro on bass. That guy still is my favorite upright bass player ever, Scott LaFaro. I don't know if you've listened to those records.
I have not.
Live I recommend them to anybody. It's just piano, bass, and drums. Live at the Village Vanguard. There were 2 weekends of sessions that were cut in like '63, and then Scott LaFaro was killed in a car wreck about 3-4 weeks later. And they're just his tone, and also a gut string bass player. That just magnificent tone. And I've become a big fan of an English bass player named Alan Spenner. And Alan was the bass player in Joe Cocker with Mad Dogs and Englishmen. He was really a rock and roll player, and he evolved into being the smoothest funk player. Pino Palladino and all my English buddies, they cite him. And his best work was on Avalon, you know, the Roxy Music record.
What year was that?
1980.
Okay.
He passed away a few years ago, but I have to have a recharge of him because, man, whenever it gets too busy, he always reminds me of how good it can be by not playing so much, you know. He's really great. And a third one, let me think. I would have to say either of the 2 Headhunters records with Paul Jackson on bass from the 70s. That's the funkiest shit ever cut as far as I'm concerned. Yeah.
You happen to know a guy named Cliff Goodwin?
I don't.
He was the guitar player in the MD for Cocker during that late 70s run.
Well, this was late 60s, early 70s.
Oh, late 60s. Okay. I'm going to just check out that Scott LaFaro record. I've never heard that. They've broken it up into 2 or 3 records, but it's all live at the Village Vanguard. And it was a real advanced. Bill Evans had just left Miles Davis, and it was so advanced. It was advanced in the theory that everything was swinging then. Those are 2 or 3 of the swingingest albums ever cut, and Scott LaFaro never walked the bass once, but it still swung like a son of a bitch. They were just having bass and piano conversations the whole time. It was crazy. And he was a bass player who was a sax player, and he started playing bass when he was about 19, and then he was dead when he was 22. And he revolutionized bass just in that short amount of time. Drugs?
No, car wreck.
Oh, terrible, man.
Yeah, it was awful.
It's a really tough question, man. What do you like most about yourself?
What I like most about myself is that I'm trying to become a better person. That's all I can say.
How about the flip side? What was one thing you might want to change about yourself?
I think it would go back to the drug thing again. I wish I'd gotten out of that shit earlier, or never started. You know?
Yeah, I hear you, man.
But that's a catch-22. Because I wouldn't be. I don't think I would have evolved as fast if I had. Because the drug culture pulled me into Zeppelin and Jimi Hendrix and all that other stuff that I deeply love. You know?
Plus, it's always like the tuition that you pay, like, kind of makes you. You know, getting burned is how you learn, unfortunately, doing stupid shit. Yeah,
well, I mean, I'll admit this to you. I was a wake and bake pot guy for 37 years, from the time I was 16.
Wow.
And then one day I just woke up and I said, you know, I got to stop this. I don't even know who I am. I hadn't even gone a week in my life without being high. And even though it's just pot, I was still high.
Yeah.
Now I fucking love being straight. I love it.
I bet it took about 30 to 45 days till you woke up and actually felt totally clear-headed.
I don't even know if I am yet. You know? It was 5 years ago or something. You know, and I don't, like I said, I'm not soapboxing that, but I'm just going to tell people, if you're a pot smoker and you're trying to get heavy into the business, take a break and see how you feel about it.
Yeah.
That's all.
That's great advice, man. Wow. Something or someone you miss from your childhood?
And I miss my best friend, Greg Horikawa, that I grew up with. He died when he was 36. We were in a lot of garage bands together as growing up. One of the greatest cats ever. And my biggest fan. When I wouldn't have moved to Nashville if he hadn't given me that extra kick. You know, I was a little scared to come. He said, "You got to do this, man. You got to get the fuck." He was a Japanese kid, and we were inseparable, you know, until I moved here.
Mm. Did he ever get to see you play here?
Yes. One time he came for when I got married, and he hung out. But he was just, nobody was ever prouder of me than him.
That's great, man. Good to have a friend like that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Tell me something about yourself people would either be surprised to hear or might find a little odd.
Oh. I would say how much I love metal.
That is.
You know, we were talking
wild.
about earlier, my son's the top session drummer in Nashville now, and he and I are the biggest metalheads ever. You know, just, he likes the real dark, deep stuff. I tend to like stuff like Audio Slave and Alice in Chains and stuff like that. I love hard rock bands that write great songs and sing good, especially if they sing good. I love that.
Man, Audio Slave was one of the greatest outfits.
Holy shit, man. I love Soundgarden, but I think that was better. I do, man.
The stuff, and in early Alice in Chains, even the later stuff was good, but I remember those like Jar of Flies and those first few albums. God, that was phenomenal.
About Alice in Chains, Audio Slave was that Cornell brought to them. I mean, I'm not dissing on Rage, because Rage certainly had their place in musical history, but they gave him the best band he could possibly have to do what he was doing, and vice versa. Yes,
I agree with you. And, you know, it's interesting. I saw, you know, the new band, they have Prophets of Rage.
Yeah.
I saw that with my kids like 2 or 3 years ago. They were here in Florida, and you realized like how much Zach is that, you know, needed to be around for that band. It was okay, but it wasn't
that thing. Yeah. If they're going to do that thing. Yeah.
You know,
but I saw all those bands. I saw them all. What I love about Alice in Chains in particular is how well their vocal parts. Cantrell's a fucking genius at arranging vocals. It's just, he's really good. And I tell people about it, they go, "What are you talking?" I said, "Man, just listen to this shit for God's sake. You know, come on."
No, it's incredibly, you know, very well written songs, great harmonies.
Great harmony. And I'm lucky, man. That bug happened to me because in '67 I saw Hendrix for the first time in Honolulu. And just a few months later, I saw Led Zeppelin on their first tour, and that shit, both those shows blew me out of the water.
Really? You saw Zeppelin in Hawaii?
I saw Zeppelin on their very first tour. It's funny, Kenny and I have that in common. He saw them 2 nights later in Colorado.
Yeah, because he saw Hendrix also.
I saw Hendrix 3 times. And so I think the 3 pivotal nights in my life were seeing the Beatles on Ed Sullivan, which really changed everything. Of course, like there's a lot of guys my age that was the, you know. And then I saw Jimi Hendrix in '67. Then I saw Zeppelin in '68. And those 3 things are why I'm sitting here. You know.
Wow, that is so cool. Holy shit, that was great, man. Who's had the biggest influence on your life, both musically and personally? Well, I guess musically might be your buddy.
Yeah, him. I would say, if I have to look back, the person who was the biggest game changer for me was Cash. There's no doubt about it. And there's 400 or 500 of us in this town walking around that owe everything we have to Johnny Cash. There's no doubt about it. He was the man. He built this fucking town. There's no doubt about it. Yeah.
And personally,
what I'm shocked about with Cash is, I didn't know about Rage Against the Machine until he told me.
You're kidding me.
He listened to everything. He read everything. He listened. He wasn't some dumbass hillbilly, man. He was a fucking genius, and also one of the most heavily educated, self-educated people that ever lived. And he knew more about other kinds of music, and he also knew more about country music than anybody. He had an absolute raging musical vocabulary. I think he thinks that he knew. He told me towards the end that he thought he knew 5,000 songs, and he never go back and listen and pick up the lyrics. He'd go, "Hey, I want to try this, man," and he'd do it. And he'd just pull some tune from 1948 and start singing it and nail the lyrics. Just crazy. He was amazing. What a mind! Just an amazing mind. Just unbelievable.
Did you happen to record? I interviewed a guy, Smokey Hormel, that he did some work.
I did. Smokey was on a couple of the Rick Rubin sessions.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Smokey's great. The other one is Matt Sweeney. Do you know about Matt Sweeney?
No.
Dude, you got to know. You got to get after Matt Sweeney.
Okay, where is he?
New York guy. He's one of Rick Rubin's boys. He's one of the best fucking guitar players I've ever heard. And he's really locked into the real New York art scene. And also, he went to high school with what's his name, Josh from Queens of the Stone Age.
Oh, Josh Holm. Yeah.
It's one of my favorite. That's one of my favorite bands. But if you can find out about Matt Sweeney, he's always doing something fucking crazy. The last time I saw him, I said, "What are you doing now?" "Oh, I'm playing bass with Iggy Pop." Shit like that. Just stuff that just doesn't add up. And he's always there. It's like crazy.
Man, you talk about another revolutionary band. That band, Iggy Pop, the shit they were doing. That's another thing I didn't mention, but towards the end of the 70s, before I moved here, I was getting real jazz fusion snooty, and I had the punk rock revolution happen to me, man. I heard the fucking Ramones and then the Sex Pistols and all that stuff, and I lost my mind. And then when the Attractions came out with Costello, to me that's still one of the greatest bass players ever. Is Bruce Thomas. Yeah, that guy is, I'm sorry. I'm sorry that I didn't mention him earlier. He was a real heavy influence on me, man. His bass playing is still some of the best stuff ever recorded, ever. Especially on Armed Forces, that record. It's just crazy how good he is. That's great, man. You're turning me on to so much new shit here. This is good. I got a lot of homework to do, man. Most important thing your dad taught you?
I was never around my dad, man. The most important thing my dad taught me was to try to be a good dad. He taught me what not being a good dad was.
Dude, I had the same.
I'm hands-on with my kid, so it's been great.
I had the exact same situation, so I feel you on that. How about your mom? Most important thing she taught you?
My mom taught me to be sweet. She was just sweet. She was sort of a real passive human being. And it was one of my best mom stories is the second night the Beatles were on Ed Sullivan. She was a big rock buddy. Like I said, her favorite band was the Everly Brothers. And of course, my old man was sitting there watching them, calling them fags and all this other stuff. And what a bunch of crap. And she looked over at me. I'll never forget this. And they were singing. Paul and John were singing together. And she goes, "This is good. It's the Everly Brothers." And she totally got it. It just went right. She loved the Beatles until Sgt. Pepper. Then they lost it. But that was good.
That's a great story with your mom, man.
Yeah,
that's pretty cool. What are you proudest of that you've done musically and personally?
The Cash stuff and now the Auerbach stuff.
That says a lot, man. You've got maybe some of the richest history of anybody I've ever spoken to be honest with it. I mean, that's...
Dude, I'm the luckiest guy alive.
Any hobbies or interests outside of music, Dave?
I have a studio. I'm sort of a studio geek. I have a really, really great... People would be surprised how great my studio is. It's right next door. I live in the country, and I have an extra building and all that. And I've built a world-class studio out there just mostly because when you buy these preamps to drag the sessions to play bass through, I was smart. That's the one smart thing I did. I never sold any of them. So when it was time to build a studio, I had racks of fucking great preamps, So I built a little studio out there, and I let my friends come and use it for free, and me and Kenny record out there. And once a month, maybe I have a commercial project out there. Yeah.
That's great, man. Any was there any? I'm sure there's lots of them. Specific experience that changed your life or altered the way you think about things?
Other than the Cash stuff and career stuff, the big flood in Nashville in 2010 changed my life because all my gear was at Soundcheck, that place that got wiped out.
Oh my God.
I had a session locker there. I lost over 30 basses. I lost all my mid-60s Fender basses except one. And I tell people this all the time. That was a watershed, ironic. Huh?
Yeah.
It was a watershed moment for me because I was so protective of that stuff and so just fascist about taking care of it and everything. I learned that it's just stuff, and that the flood hit me at my home here too. I'd been living I got a beautiful 2 acres in the country. There's a creek running back behind my place. That flood changed a lot of people in Nashville. It fucked a lot of shit up, and it made me realize how all that shit downtown that I lost, nobody got hurt. I didn't get hurt. out here. My place was kind of okay. It got trashed a little bit, but my wife and I were safe. We'd only been living here for 10 days when it hit.
Oh my
and my
God.
property was overrun. I mean, it was a foot of water, everywhere, which led to me taking stock about how I look at gear and possessions, that it's just stuff, like I said. But it also started me on a journey because something happened to me. I love the mid-'60s Fender. This is gear stuff, the mid-'60s Fender basses and stuff. One of my mid-'60s Fenders survived. It was my 1964 jazz bass. And they were right on the floor with all the P basses I had. And I can't tell you why that one survived and the other ones didn't, but it just did. It got wet too. The water was up to the top of the headstocks on all these basses.
Oh my God.
And when I pulled them out of the cases, they just disintegrated, most of them. But the jazz bass, I pulled it out. And even my tech's like, I have no idea why this happened, But it started me on a journey when I started looking. I knew I couldn't replace all those years of collecting, but one thing I needed to do was get a couple of really good basses. And I had a friend named Paul Asola he lives here now. He was in the Saturday Night Live band for a long time. And I said, man, I got to find me a 63P bass. And he goes, Dave, you really need to look at the 57 through 60, 61. He goes, those are the best basses. I said, really? And I got to checking it out. And I'm happy to announce that about 2 months ago, I bought a 1960P bass.
Good for you.
I went for it, and it was too much money. But Russ Paul comes back into the thing. I was talking to him. I said, man, this goddamn bass costs $11,000. I said, I can't do this. And he grabbed me by the shirt, and he goes, you're 66. Buy the fucking bass.
Nice.
Okay. So I did. And it's the best. There are people now saying it's the best sounding bass in Nashville. It's a miracle, that bass. Dan's making me use it on everything.
That's great, man.
And man, it was another life-changing experience to plug that in for the first time and have the engineer walk around from the console and go, what the fuck are you playing? Oh, what year is that? I went, it's the 60s. He immediately looked at me and said, that's the best sounding bass I ever heard. Yeah.
So you'll get your return on that investment for sure.
Yeah, changed my life, that bass.
That's right.
And I got to, just one step further on the gear, and I'll let that go. I gotta give a big shout out to Hans Peter from Warwick. I was an endorsee for 10 years, and I just left them a few months ago, but those guys really helped raise my profile and help open my mind to alternative basses and stuff, and they were really good to me, and I have 2 or 3 Warwicks. You'd have to kill me to get them away from me. But those cats really took care of me. And it led me to leaving. I have a signature bass coming out in January at NAMM with, you heard of Vintage Guitars? And
yeah, of course.
Trevor Wilkinson.
Yeah.
We designed a bass together, and it's coming out. So.
Very cool. Man, you know what? You've had a lot of these things of, things that have like impacted you. And I always think a lot of that credit goes to you in a sense because, and I'm not blowing smoke, but I think, to anybody who does that, because I think there's 2 ways to handle stress, the fuck me, why did this happen way? And then the second way, which is I really work hard to try that is, okay, number one, what was my role in this? Because I hate feeling like a victim. And if I could figure out what my responsibility in it, and sometimes there is, and most of the time there is, sometimes there's not, I don't feel like a victim. And then number 2, which is what you've done, what can I get out of this thing?
It's exactly right. And what I got out of it finally was that you got to take a breath when these things happen and just not go off and start reacting, and I remember looking at my wife when I lost all those guitars, and I looked at her and said, you know what? We were about to open the locker, and we knew it was going to be a fucking tragedy. Yeah. I said, you know what? Before I open the door, we got to get over this right now. Let's get over it now. And she looked at me and said, well, that's mighty mature of you. And I said, I was just standing here thinking, I said, this is going to be a bitch any way you look at it. But I can't let this fuck me up. And it worked. I was going, oh, shit, but I didn't go, oh, fuck. I didn't do that because there were grown men crying all over that building that day. And it was like they finally let us back in. And that's what I've taken away from this and it's funny you should mention that. I have friends in this town that are first call session and touring guys whose lives when they got here were totally smooth. They're still married to the same woman. They're happy. And God bless them. for instance, I wish I was still married to Jerry's mom, but it was just something that couldn't happen. But it's helped me design my life now to where it's really smooth. I got the best girl in the world now, and everything's smooth and nice and happy, and there's joy. And if I hadn't gone through all that shit, I feel like some of those guys that walk into town, now I understand that they were pretty evolved human beings when they got here, and I wasn't. And I had to evolve. I had to get to where they are.
Yeah. No, I agree with you on that. I've had a lot of stuff going on in it, and I've really tried to work hard to gain something from that, and that hopefully gets me less stress, more peace, and be less of a dick somehow.
Yeah. I'm lucky because I grew up in a really religious household, not really, but fairly. And then in the late 70s, I studied Zen. I sat Zazen for 4 years, and more that stuff's coming out in me, and I didn't realize how deeply I was affected by all that stuff. And, everybody's got to have something, man.
Yeah.
Some people it's drugs, some people it's whatever. But to me, it's just growing up probably in the most open-minded society in the world and being influenced by the Asian stuff and all that. I'm a really lucky guy when it came to that.
Man, I'm just going to ask you one more question. Biggest change, and you might have just answered, biggest change in your personality over the last 10 years, and how much of this change has been deliberate and how much is just a part of aging?
I think a lot of it's a part of aging, but I just got a divorce a year ago. I broke up with this is my third wife. And when that happened, I realized that, once again, I'd gone from one relationship to the next. It was the first time I decided to take a breath and just say, I got to be by myself. If I can't live by myself for a while and dig that, then I'm just going to keep making the same stupid mistakes. So I was able to keep my crib out here in the country, and I just took a chill pill for a year.
Good,
I just kicked back and dated a little bit, didn't get serious about anything. And it said, if I wait, the right thing's going to happen. And damned if it didn't. When I met my girl now, if I had just jumped back into the dating game and did all that sort of stuff, and all this shit affects your career, man, and the way you look at life. And she's been the biggest blessing. And I wouldn't have found her if I'd been flailing around, slinging dick around and doing all that shit. But that's a Jimi Hendrix line.
I've never heard that one. That's a first.
Oh, there's an interview of him sitting on the couch. What you been doing, Jimmy? Oh, playing guitar, slinging some dick around.
That's classic, man. Man, how do I get my 18-year-old daughter to realize that when she breaks up with somebody that the world isn't over? I guess she's got to wait till she's ready, right?
Somebody had to say that to me, and I've actually passed that on to one of my best friends. Be by yourself. Yeah. Try being by yourself. You don't want to just tell her that. Say, hey, you know what? Be by yourself for a while. See what you think.
Oh, I did. She's, that age, man, she's the smartest person in the room.
Oh, I know.
And I'm certainly the stupidest.
My kid's just now coming around. He finally told me a few weeks ago that he thanked me for all the influence I was on him. But for a long time, I was the dumbest musician that ever lived.
And how old is he?
He's 34.
Yeah, my oldest is 28, and then just in the last year and a half, 2 years, he come around with me. Same thing.
Yeah, my son's. Everybody says he's the greatest drummer in town now. He's phenomenal.
That's all. I heard that from two different people when I was at NAMM. So and that's it is what it is, man.
When he was 1 year old, man, he was doing sessions when he was 10. Just
get out.
Yes, and doing great, reading charts, everything. Yeah.
So he's like a prodigy.
He was a prodigy.
And holy crap!
I went through some serious life shit with him, like being in the car when he was in the 7th grade, and I'm driving to school, and he looks at me and goes, "It's going to be the last time you drive me to school, Dad." And I said, "Why?" He goes, "Because I'm not going back." He was already working tape machines at home and playing and practicing 10 hours a day practicing. And he just said, he finally got mad and looked at me and goes, "You know what I'm going to do. This shit don't have nothing to do with that. Fuck that." So I had to go home and sit and think.
How do you zen through that one, man?
Well, I talked to Reed about it actually, and I talked to his mom, and I just said, you know what? He didn't have a chance with his grandfather and me. This is who he is.
Yeah.
I said, I'm going to go for it. I'm going to let him quit school, and I did.
And it all worked out.
It totally worked.
Yeah.
Everybody loves him. He's self-educated himself. He's one of the brightest, smartest people I know, and one of the most incredible players and one of the greatest bass players in town now, too.
Most musicians I've met are pretty bright.
They are, intuitively, yeah, they are.
And they're very well read, which makes you learn a lot by that. You know, you read enough books, you learn a lot of stuff. Yeah, I have not met very few guys that I've got off the phone and said, what the fuck is going on there? I mean, very, very few. And it's like out of 300 plus. I
know. Oh, yeah. He's doing great, man. So that's all worked out, and I'm in a really good spot I'm still fairly healthy, I hope. And my career is better now than it's ever been. I just can't even tell you. You know, it's like crazy.
Well, man, I am so happy to hear that, and I am so happy you took the time to spend some time with me and share all your stories, man.
It was a blast. It's the best interview I've ever done. It was great.
Thank you so much. And let me tell everybody, first of all, check out Dave online. It's Dave Roe, R-O-E. And he is also available if you can find time to book him on airgigs.com. That is a website where people can book sessions. And
send me tracks and I can play on it and send you back. My website, I have a pretty developed website with all my credits. It's daveroe.net.
Well, you say it's all your credits. It's like, honestly, it's so, you've done so much, man. It's almost all your credits on there. You need like a 15 web pages down or something like that. But yeah, he does have a great website. And if you're looking for literally maybe one of the most experienced bass players on earth that's still playing actively and on top of his shit, go to airgigs.com and check out Dave Roe and check him out on YouTube. And support Dan Auerbach on tour, because you'll be out with Dan.
I don't think we're going to go out anymore. We're just making records, man. So he says we're not, but I got a feeling we'll probably go out whenever he makes a record. So, which is what we're doing every day. Whenever we do a session with an artist, when they leave, we cut a couple more tracks. So he's stockpiling stuff. So I don't know if I'm ever going to go out again. But I got this little deal going with Kenny Vaughn. We may go out with that band. We'll see.
What does Mellencamp's band go out?
I haven't worked with John in a while, but I did play on a couple. I went up to Bloomington, Indiana, and played on a couple of tracks for him just maybe 6 months ago. But he tours 80 to 100 dates a year. He's killing. So I recommend, on your end, I recommend you interview Andy York, and I also recommend you interview Kenny Vaughn.
And I'm going to check out Matt Sweeney.
Yeah, Matt Sweeney. He's the crazy man.
Hey, man, thank you for your time. I can't thank you enough, Dave. Thank you. Really appreciate it. Everybody, thank you so much for listening. Please check out Dave Roe and support his music and whatever he's doing. And again, go to airgigs.com if you want to book him for some tracks. Thanks again to Dave Roe for spending time with us. I really appreciate it. And make sure you go to everyonelovesguitar.com. Sign up to get on our newsletter list. You can do that now. And remember, most important, happiness is a choice, so choose wisely. Be nice, go play your guitar, and have some fun. Till next time, peace and love, everybody. I'm out. We hope you enjoyed this show. If you did, subscribe to the Everyone Loves Guitar podcast, and you can do this online at everyonelovesguitar.com or on iTunes. And if you like the show, please leave us a 5-star positive review. The more 5-star reviews we get, the higher our show ranks, and higher rankings mean we get to continue speaking with cool, interesting guests on our show. We'll see you on the next episode, and until then, keep playing your guitar and have fun making music.